Mr. Speaker, friends and colleagues, honored guests, thank you for joining us to honor Abraham Lincoln this evening. And I do promise to keep in mind that Lincoln's greatest speech, the Gettysburg Address, was also one of his shortest. Our history can easily be taken for granted. Most of us view America through the rose-colored glasses of the present. We know how the story ends. The Union wins the Battle of Gettysburg. The Union wins the Civil War, and the 13th Amendment ends slavery. Over 160 years later, it's easy to view these events as inevitable, but they were not. They were earned one day at a time at great cost. During the Battle of Gettysburg, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, a former teacher from Maine, held a Union position on a hill called Little Round Top. The capture of Chamberlain's position would have led to the complete destruction of the Union Army. Out of ammunition and under attack from superior rebel forces, Chamberlain refused to surrender. He ordered his men to fix bayonets and charge the enemy. In desperate hand-to-hand combat, Chamberlain broke the rebel assault and held Little Round Top. On that day, Chamberlain held, and the present as we came to know it, a present that we now take for granted, victory at Gettysburg, the preservation of the Union, the passage of the 13th Amendment, hung in the balance. That one day determined the fate of our nation. History is made one day at a time, and so are great leaders like Abraham Lincoln. Most of us are familiar with Lincoln's accomplishments as president, but his days as a state legislator, congressman, and Republican Party leader form the character of his presidency. Lincoln served in the Illinois legislature for 8 years. Illinois was a rough and tumble state, still very much a part of the Western frontier. Political campaigns were spirited. As a young legislator, Lincoln honed a sense of humor that chagrined his adversaries and made him a very effective communicator. Once, responding to an opponent who called him two-faced, Lincoln looked at his audience and asked, "Friends, if I had two faces, would I wear this one?" At least 43 members of the House will appreciate that Lincoln was a member of the minority party in the Illinois General Assembly. Illinois was a predominantly Democratic state. In order to accomplish his goals, Lincoln developed the idealistic pragmatism that defined his presidency. Lincoln was no saint. Once, to prevent a quorum and to hold off a vote that he knew he would lose, Lincoln jumped out one of the State House windows as the sergeant of arms locked the door. Lincoln did what he had to do to move the Illinois state capital from Vandalia to Springfield, and he did much the same thing in order to pass the 13th Amendment as president. As a legislator, Lincoln developed an independence that served him well, later declaring that he would stand with any man who stood right, stand with him so long as he stands right, and only part company with him when he went wrong. He also came to appreciate the importance of building personal relationships to accomplish legislative goals, famously noting that the best way to destroy your enemies is to make them your friends. Lincoln served only one term in the United States Congress. As the only Whig in a majority Democratic Illinois delegation, Lincoln was criticized for failing to bring home the bacon, a charge that, I must say, is probably familiar to many of us in the minority party. Lincoln was also ridiculed for his speeches in opposition to the Mexican War, which he believed to be unjust. Warned by his friends that continual opposition to the war was hurting him in his district, Lincoln replied, "The probability that we may fail in the struggle ought not deter us from the support of a cause we deem just." Later he added that important principles must be inflexible. Lincoln's pragmatism ended when it conflicted with his principles. Returning to Illinois after his term in Congress, Lincoln focused on his law practice and his family. Lincoln's skill as a lawyer was legendary, as were his low fees. I'll share one of Lincoln's comments on litigation, which I'm sure the chairman of our House Judiciary Committee and all of our colleagues who are lawyers will appreciate. Lincoln said, "Discourage litigation. Persuade your neighbors to compromise whenever you can. There will be business enough." Of course, there probably weren't as many lawyers in Lincoln's day as there are now. Lincoln had a stormy but affectionate relationship with his wife. My wife Kathy laughed at his comments on marriage, maybe a little too much. Lincoln claimed that marriage was neither heaven nor hell, simply purgatory. Why did she think that was so funny? After returning to Illinois, Lincoln said he lost interest in politics until the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which permitted the extension of slavery into the territories. "What I did after that," Lincoln noted with his gift for understatement, "is pretty well known." Re-entering politics as a Republican, Lincoln declared that no one is good enough to govern another without his consent. That is the anchor of republicanism. He added that Republicans are for the man and for the dollar, but in case of a conflict, the man before the dollar. Lincoln was the Republican candidate for the Senate in 1854 and 1858. The Lincoln-Douglas debates, reprinted in most of America's newspapers, rocketed Lincoln to national prominence. Lincoln's principled opposition to the moral, social, and political evils of slavery was gaining ground, largely because Lincoln communicated it simply and effectively. Lincoln's comment that, "Whenever I hear anyone arguing in favor of slavery, I feel a strong impulse to see it tried on him personally," put the issue in words that anyone could understand. Lincoln was nominated by the Republican Party for president in 1860. He won by less than 40% of the popular vote, and the South rebelled. Few presidents endured the trials Lincoln faced during the Civil War. Lincoln dealt with disastrous military defeats, generals who wouldn't fight, generals disrespectful of his authority, a cabinet at war within itself, a fractured party in Congress, criticism from those who thought that he wasn't moving quickly enough to end slavery, criticism from those who thought he was moving too quickly to end slavery. And the list is almost endless. Lincoln dealt with all these issues admirably. But perhaps the most important thing Lincoln did for America, then and now, was to state clearly why America had to fight the Civil War. Speaking at Gettysburg, not far from where Joshua Chamberlain had made his heroic stand at Little Round Top, Abraham Lincoln fulfilled the promise of equality made in the Declaration of Independence. The words Lincoln spoke ring as true now as they did then. That we here highly resolve that those dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Amen.
Amen.